he looked like he was beaten at the start of that set, not just at the end of that set. I'm interested to find out more, though, because a lot of Brits won't be aware of the college sports system in the US and how competitive it is and how, if you're talented enough, you can get an amazing education. Stanford's one of the best universities, well, not just in the US, in the world. You can get that by being a fantastic athlete.
Yeah, so there's the system in the States that allows you to pursue academics and your athletic endeavor sort of with the same rigor simultaneously. Arthur's a great example of that. As I recall it, and from my perspective, at 13, 14 years old, Arthur was one of the top players in Britain for his age group at 13. And at that time, he decided to go to King's College, which is a strong academic school, and continue to pursue tennis and academics simultaneously. Some of his peers at that point really prioritized their tennis. And so we were the beneficiaries of that, because when Arthur went through our recruiting process, I would say he probably was a little bit more under the radar from where he should have been, because he just didn't have, based on his abilities, because he just didn't have quite as many results, given that he was continuing to pursue both at the same time. And so we were really fortunate to work with Arthur for 3 years at Stanford. I want to be crystal clear. He's been gone from school for 3 years. He and his team deserve full credit for the run that he is having now. I am a very passionate but an observer and supporter of Arthur now, but just really thrilled for him. He's a wonderful guy. To your question of sort of getting that dual purpose sort of experience of athletics and education, I think particularly in college tennis, there are lots of sports over in the States, but in college tennis, the pathway to being a professional tennis player is being seen as utilizing college as a viable pathway more so than ever. If you look to 2 weeks ago at the French Open, 23 of the 128 participants in the men's French Open had some form of collegiate tennis under their belt. And so whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, if your goal was to be a professional tennis player and you opted to go to college, it perhaps felt like there was a step back in your journey. Now it feels like it is a part of that journey.
And Paul, if there's one thing I do know about Stanford is they call themselves the nerds, don't they? The athletes.
Nerd Nation.
The nerd nation. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of that? Why is that? Because they're so clever?
Well, myself notwithstanding, but there are a lot of clever people at Stanford for sure. I think it's one of the places, lots of places in in the States to go to college. Stanford is known as being a very strong academic school, while also pursuing athletics at the highest level. I think if Stanford were its own country in the last Olympic Games in Paris, we would have finished 10th or 11th in the medal count. Wow. And so it just is viewed as this place where you can really not sacrifice on either side. The academics or the athletics can sort of achieve and pursue at the highest level.
Paul, it's been great talking to you, and to go full circle, look, he's fantastic with the racket, but the fact that he seems like a really good guy is also great to see. Paul, good to chat to you too. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Jess is here with the sport. I feel like I've done your job for you the past 10 minutes, Jess. I do apologise, but let's just revisit that story that Jarell Quansah is going to miss the game with Norway. But if England get through on Saturday, he's potentially going to miss the next game as well because of a two-match ban.
Yeah, it's a terrible shame for him, isn't it? But, I mean, when you see that challenge, I don't think anyone's really, against the fact that it was a red card. It was a bit of a reckless challenge. The trailing leg was high and it did make contact with the Mexican opponent's shin. And so it looked quite dangerous. But considering everything that's gone on around red cards at this World Cup, particularly with Balogun and the USA, and that being a one-match ban, but then later suspended, so he didn't actually miss any football. The fact now that Quansah's missing 2 games, I think, will be a bitter pill to swallow for these England players and fans. Yeah,
yes, indeed, although it didn't stop Belgium beating the US, did it, with Balogun playing. If they get through, and look, no one wants to jinx anything, Norway are no pushover, that's a big game. But the next match would be against either Switzerland or Argentina. They are pretty different sides. How's Thomas Tuchel likely to think about that? Or is he just going to park it until after midnight on Saturday.
Yeah, look, let's make no bones about it. They've got to get past Norway first, and a certain Erling Haaland, who is playing exceptionally well at his first ever World Cup. 7 goals, and very much in the race for the Golden Boot. And in fact, Erling Haaland's playing so well, he's on this 14-game scoring run for Norway. But yeah, you're right, if England can get past Norway, it could be Argentina, it could be Switzerland in these semi-finals. Now, do you think England fans would prefer Switzerland, or would they prefer Lionel Messi's Argentina? I might say that Argentina might be the better opponents for England because they play more open football.
Yeah.
And England have proved in this tournament that when teams come at them, as Argentina are likely to do, they actually play a higher standard of football.
There's history there as well. There's history,
oh, my
Jess,
goodness.
isn't that? Come on.
You can remember Beckham sending off against Argentina in that. Look, I don't want to say too much, but it's a mouth-watering prospect, England against Argentina in a semi-final. Got to get there first, though, Matt. OK, but let's continue talking football next after this short break, where I'll bring you up to date with the day's sports news.
Robbie Keane, the manager. When did you realise that coaching and management was something that was going to be in your future?
Well, I started doing my coaching badges in my late 20s with the Irish FA. I used to do quite a lot anyway. I used to watch a lot of the managers, see what they do, how they deal with players, and also the sessions that they did. So I was always kind of intrigued with stuff like that. But then as I started to get older, I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to do when I finished, because I love football. I love being on the grass. I love being around a club. I live in the dressing room and with players and trying to help players. So, yeah, I kind of knew a long time ago.
Great players don't always make great managers. So talk to us about that transition.
I found it quite natural because I was a captain for a long time.
Robbie Keane captains the Tottenham side tonight on his 100th Premiership appearance for them.
You know, you'd have to fall out with certain people. You know, people's not turning up, disrespecting the coaching staff in some way, or especially the fitness guys or the kit men. So I was always okay with that.
What did you learn from being an assistant?
When I was with the national team, with Mick, obviously I knew Mick before because I played under him, so I knew Mick.
Thanks a lot, Jess. Now here is the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The heatwave conditions are becoming more extensive, but the peak will be tomorrow as it will turn overall less hot at the weekend. Expect a very fine, warm evening tonight, although northwest Scotland will be rather dull and damp. The northwest of Ireland will see cloud as well. Some western coast of Wales and northwest England look murky.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Tonight, a region suspended between war and peace as the United States and Iran trade missile strikes again. The U.S. military says it hit 90 targets overnight, with more explosions in the past hour. Tehran responded by firing on American bases in the Gulf. All this as huge crowds turned out for the last day of the Supreme Leader's funeral, some demanding the death of Donald Trump. So what will it take to end this violent cycle? And will peace talks scheduled for this weekend actually go ahead? That will be our focus tonight. In South Africa, the crowds hunting for foreigners as the backlash against migration grows. How Greenland's melting ice caps are causing heat waves and extreme weather across Europe. We'll explain the science of it all coming up. And the Viking row taking the World Cup by storm, and the one fan who went viral for refusing to take part. Find out why coming up on The World with me, Barbara Serra. Good evening. This is all becoming a violent, repetitive cycle. First, Iran targets ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military responds with missiles and airstrikes. Tehran hits back at American bases in the region. Oil prices begin to rise, and that's until the two sides decide to talk. They send teams to Switzerland or Pakistan to agree a vaguely worded ceasefire deal.
Iran wants to make a deal, and we're dealing very nicely with them. We've got to have no nuclear weapons. If we do, that's a big factor. And they're willing to do things today that they weren't willing to do 2 months ago. We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal.
The deal's all signed, and the strait is already partially opened. As you know, they're doing a little hunting for a couple of mines.
Well, after the obligatory boasts from Donald Trump, things go quiet for a while until tensions flare up again. Today, as Iran's supreme leader was buried in his hometown, the region remains stuck in a spiral of violence, with more explosions reported this evening. So is it even possible to end this war for good? We'll discuss that tonight after our first report from our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons.
Donald Trump had warned that America would attack again, and here was confirmation. Before midnight, the start of a wave of missile strikes against Iran. Among the targets, the port of Chabahar, from where Iran had reportedly launched a series of attacks against shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran inevitably retaliated with attacks against Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar and Jordan. But the American president was bullish, insisting his nation was asserting its authority.
We've already won militarily. They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago. They want to make a deal so badly. I just don't know if they're worthy of making a deal. I don't know that they're going to honor the deal. That's the problem.
But the president is desperate for a deal in order to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, paralyzed again. The price of oil, which had been falling in the hopes of a peace deal, has gone up by 10% over the past week. Talks between America and Iran had been due to resume on Saturday, following the week-long funeral service for Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed on the first day of the war. But his death has simply ushered in new rulers, with a similar resolve to face down the United States. Iran's tactics have revolved around exerting greater control over the Strait of Hormuz and also spreading chaos in this region by attacking multiple different countries. But so far, there have been no missiles sent this way towards Israel, and Israel hasn't joined in the attack on Iran. But if either of those two things were to change, then a volatile situation could rapidly become a lot more inflammatory. Among the huge crowds at Khamenei's funeral, there were banners calling for Trump to be assassinated. There is little sign that fault lines are being repaired. The old Ayatollah is being laid to rest. The tensions he helped to frame appear still to be in rude health. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi. And Alex, it happened around the same time last night, and now we're getting some reports of explosions across southern Iran.
Yeah, you get the sense that this is a cycle that is just going to keep on happening. The third consecutive night that we have now seen strikes, and it appears that they are intensifying. Now, according to the United States military, over the last 48 hours, there have been something like 170, they claim, targets hit inside Iran. The Iranians have also responded as well. Their fire has been more limited, a suggestion perhaps that they have been degraded by the months of fighting previously, but they've managed to launch ballistic missiles towards Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. Ballistic missiles have been intercepted over Jordan. Now, in terms of what the Americans are trying to do, it's hard to think really that they do have much of a strategy. The memorandum of understanding that was supposed to end this war has been ripped up, and you get the sense that Donald Trump is really just trying to bomb his way out of this. But we have seen from previous cycles that that doesn't break Iranian resolve. They appear to be quite willing to accept damage, providing they can also inflict pain on the Strait of Hormuz and keep that leverage there, and also keep their nuclear program. The big question then is how this ends. We know that mediators from the Pakistani and the Qatari channels are trying to bring both sides back to the negotiating table, but at the moment, it doesn't look as though that is about to happen.
Alex Rossi, our international correspondent. Alex, thank you. Well, you saw a graph there in Adam's piece. Oil prices are beginning to rise, and the impact could soon trickle down to you and me. Just have another look. This chart shows the cost of a barrel of Brent crude, which has increased after the past few days of strikes. But look at this chart. The oil price is way below the highs and the averages seen through the war. And that's because the markets have learned to expect ceasefire stops and starts. So it will be a while before we feel the change. And crucially, this time, oil and gas tankers are still getting through the key Strait of Hormuz shipping lane. Bloomberg data shows 10 ships got through on Wednesday, but that is still far fewer than before the war. I've been speaking to Barbara Leaf, Assistant Secretary of State for the Middle East under President Biden, and asked her for her reaction to the third consecutive night of U.S. strikes on Iran.
Barbara, look, it's the ceasefire itself has been fragile from the get-go, and the MOU has been a framework that has been violated repeatedly. But this current set of counter-punches between the U.S. and Iran, I really take back to about 10 days ago when Oman began working with the International Maritime Organization to help ships come out of the Gulf through Omani sovereign waters. The Iranians rhetorically blasted the Omanis for doing that, and essentially extended their remit to Omani sovereign waters and said, nobody shall pass. They must pass through us, even in Omani waters. And that began this cycle of hitting tankers, trying to hit tankers. The U.S. responded, and we were off to the races.
I mean, when we look at the number of ships, actually, I think there were 576 in June, twice as many as May, but obviously, I think just a sixth of what we saw at this time last year. The Strait of Hormuz, key to the memorandum of understanding. Is there a memorandum anymore? Is there a kind of ceasefire anymore?
Well, I think it's a complicated thing to parse, but I think the best way to look at it is, although the president said in the last day or so in Ankara, well, as far as he's concerned, the ceasefire is over. In fact, there have been such stresses and strains on it throughout its life since April. But moreover, I think it's fair to say that it's still the case that Tehran and Washington would prefer not to return to full military operations for economic reasons, political reasons, et cetera. So the question is, how do they get to a stand down? More importantly, how does the mediator, Qatar, with support from others, get to a place where the Iranians would back off on this question of the Strait.
Qatar, one of the countries, I think Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan as well, that have received attacks by Iran. I mean, you mentioned their role as mediator, but what can, in general, the countries in that region do to help?
So I think it is well past time for a mobilization of countries, be it Europe, be it countries from the region, plus Europe, to make a coalition, to make a multilateral effort to pressure the Iranians to, again, step back from their attempt to make this a permanent management, coercive management of the Strait of Hormuz. If you cannot think of another issue in the world today on which there is actually international consensus other than in Tehran, Moscow, and Pyongyang. So mobilize that consensus. The Trump administration is not good at multilateral diplomacy. It really doesn't buy it. But this is where you want it.
You mentioned European nations as well. There had been talk of sending security missions to secure the Strait of Hormuz, the UK, one of the countries that had proposed it. Where do you see it? What did you make of them at NATO, for example?
So I think, in fact, there wasn't a lot of discussion in NATO in the private session about Iran. There was a lot of angry rhetoric from the president in the public setting, but there was not a lot of discussion, as I understand it, behind closed doors. The problem I see right now is, yes, Europeans are uniformly opposed to the war. They weren't consulted. They helped, a number of them helped in the defense of the Gulf countries. But they're, to my mind, and with all due respect for our European partners, they're sitting being passive about the issue of how to unlock the Strait of Hormuz. You don't have to associate yourself with the war itself in order to do something important to advance the prospect of finding arrangements post-conflict that will be status quo ante on full free commerce through the Strait and will provide a sort of a stable, secure environment for all of these countries. And I think that's where the Europeans ought to be ready to lead.
We heard the president call the Iranian leadership scum, sick people. I mean, it's language that he has used before. You know the region very well. You've been a senior diplomat there for many, many years. How does that language, how is it seen? Is it seen as a sign of strength or not?
No, it's not. So on the one hand, the president also engages in a lot of threat-making. And I think at this point, the threats have no traction whatsoever with the regime. They discount it entirely. I think it does insult people, and that's a different thing. So if you've already got a very tough kind of atmosphere in which to negotiate, it's kind of pointless to be throwing insults into the mix. I mean, it's just pointless.
You just said threats have no traction. I mean, another thing that Donald Trump has threatened is to hit civilian infrastructure, desalination plants, electric plants. I'm just wondering what the risk that could pose of a further escalation.
There are a couple risks. The Iranians have made clear all the way through the hot phase of the war and even after, in the ceasefire, that they will match the U.S. and Israel. So you hit a desal plant in Iran, we hit one in Bahrain. You hit an electrical grid in Iran, we hit one in Kuwait. So horizontal escalation. They punish Gulf states that do their best to defend themselves, their people, their facilities, but it's quite almost impossible to catch everything, as it were. And if you had a devastating set of strikes on desalination plants in any country in the Gulf, or let alone a number of them, it would really shut things down. So I think there's the risk simply that the Iranians will immediately retaliate. Secondly, those are potential war crimes for the U.S. military. Thirdly, it doesn't advance anything. It doesn't actually move the needle. The Iranians will punch back, but they will be unfazed. So what's going to move the needle are negotiations backed by a sense that there's a large consensus of support. And that's where I think getting activity, political activity, diplomatic activity to help pressure Iran to open the strait fully in accordance with the MOU commitments that they signed on to. That's where you can get some traction. But threat making and hitting civilian infrastructure, no.
Barbara Leaf speaking to me a little earlier. Well, this is The World with me, Barbara Serra. Still to come, how anti-migrant tensions in South Africa are causing thousands of people to flee the country.
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armory.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Every day in parts of Johannesburg, crowds of people roam the streets hunting for foreigners. Rising anti-migrant tensions have pushed thousands of people from other African nations to flee. South Africa's unemployment rate is now above 30%. Crime is on the rise, and migrants are bearing the brunt of the blame. Police say around 50,000 people have been arrested for being in the country illegally so far this year. And around 25,000 people, mainly from Malawi, Zimbabwe, Ghana and Nigeria, have been repatriated in recent weeks. The country's president has pledged to crack down on protests, but tensions are rising, as our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, reports.
A warning from a South African to a refugee.
We must close as soon as possible.
A crowd is coming, and they're hunting for foreigners. The warning is heeded. The shop is closed just in time. As the small mob approaches.
It's a small crowd, but an intimidating one. They've got a very astute sense of their establishments that might be foreign-owned. And then when they do see one, they go speak to the neighbors or the people near a place and tell them that you must warn them, you must tell the foreigners to leave. So there is this real door-to-door campaign happening here in Soweto, but also in areas across South Africa and across Johannesburg.
They're on a mission, drawing in neighbors and bystanders here in Soweto, but not without resistance.
Until the other group of...
Peter Manete is an activist working to protect migrants in his community.
They've already taken decision that they will close the shops. It's hard to really 100% control everything, but at least when we are here, we know that they can't just do as they wish, because they know that we are against what is happening.
Thousands have been marching across South Africa, rallying against illegal immigration and calling for African nationals, undocumented and documented, to leave. With harassment and extrajudicial violence on the rise. People of all ages are joining these regular neighborhood protests to keep the foreigners on notice.
When will you stop? When will you say my job is done?
When all of them are gone. Not 80% gone. When all of them are gone, then I'll say my job is done. Or unless, if I say the job is done is when I'm dead. That's when I say I'm done.
Their protest makes a stop here, at their local police station, to deliver a memorandum.
Other businesses found to be operating unlawfully.
They're appealing to the police to crack down on foreigners, the immigrants that they're offering to hand over.
How do you identify foreigners?
We stay with them. We know that they are not South Africans. Others, when they come, they will tell us they are here to visit our aunt. And then we find out from them that I am from Zim. I'm here to visit my aunt. Also find out now he has already spent over 7 years in our country.
As John meets with the station commander, 4 men are brought in. 3 from Ethiopia and 1 man from Lesotho, under citizen's arrest that's unlawful under the Immigration Act. The crowd is pleased, but it's not enough. They want more and plead with the police to take action.
We've been working together, but don't violate, don't beat people, don't assault people. You give us information like the way you give us information, we're going to arrest the people.
Back on the streets, they search the shops and spread the word, demanding that everyone join their cause, in spite of the upset. Their marches ended and the coast is now clear. The shop warned to close is back in business.
For now, I don't want to go back to Ethiopia because there's still war in Ethiopia.
What made you come to South Africa? Why did you choose South Africa?
Because there's peace in South Africa.
See all this. It was for here.
That peace is now under threat. South of Soweto, foreigners are reckoning with mob violence.
So now I was skating because he wanted to come inside. I said, no, it's going to kill me. Then I came outside through the window. Then when I came outside, now it look like maybe I'm there, Papa now. Just taking the guns, hitting in my head.
The sun is setting over these troubled neighborhoods in Johannesburg, fractured by these anti-immigration protests. And even though the protests have stopped, criminals will now be targeting vulnerable African foreign nationals.
South African neighborhoods are now battlefields in the country's biggest domestic crisis yet. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News, Johannesburg.
Andy Burnham is now all but certain to be the UK's next Prime Minister, after the vast majority of Labour MPs backed him today to be the party's new leader. Well, today he apologized for Labour's initial response to Israel's attack on Gaza. In a video message, he admitted the party didn't get it right and will need to do better when he gets to number 10.
I know many people feel that at the start of Israel's military action in Gaza, my party didn't get it right, and I am sorry about that. The response has too often not been good enough. We need to do better.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is with me in the studio. John, I think Gaza's probably been the most divisive issue for the Labour Party, probably since the war in Iraq of 2003. And Andy Burnham here addressing it head on.
Well, this is a major statement from the incoming, soon-to-be incoming Prime Minister, because up till this morning, we hadn't heard a peep from Mr Burnham about foreign policy. Then first he wrote an article in the Times, which was not controversial at all. It was the sort of policies that we've seen from Sir Keir Starmer on the Ukraine, on America and on Europe and so on. And then we get this video and interview in The Guardian in which he really does... I mean, you can argue that he's pandering to his left-wing MPs because it's a major departure from the policy of Sir Keir Starmer. Mr Burnham went on to say, we've got to do more to put pressure on the Israeli government. Yes, we've taken some important steps, but let's be honest, the UK was too slow to call for a ceasefire. We must now do more to strengthen our approach. Now, that's so different from what we heard from Sir Keir Starmer, going back to when he was first elected Labour leader before he became Prime Minister. He was seen very much as pro-Israel, and in fact he was. There were two really low points for Keir Starmer. One, a radio interview in which he was asked about UK support for Israel, and he was asked, cutting off power, cutting off water in Gaza, is that an appropriate response? He said, I think Israel does have that right. It's an ongoing situation. Everything should be done within international law. That produced a furious backlash from Labour politicians in Parliament, local government. A few weeks later, he suffered a huge rebellion on an SNP motion calling for a ceasefire, and various front benchers were either quit or were sacked. And, of course, he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to recognise Palestine last year. And that was, of course, seen as very much having to bow to pressure from his backbenchers.
It'll be interesting to see how Andy Burnham behaves when he actually is Prime Minister. John Craig, thank you. Now, this is The World with me, Barbara Serra. Coming up next, Ukraine hits back at Russia with major drone strikes on its oil facilities.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Are Ukraine's fortunes changing in the war with Russia? While Kyiv and other cities continue to be bombarded by Russian drones and missiles, Ukraine has been striking back at Russia's oil. And it could soon add the American Patriot missile defense system to its armor. In recent days, Ukrainian forces have been successful in a number of drone strikes on Russian oil facilities. Overnight, Kyiv attacked 12 Russian tankers and 2 oil depots. And this comes as Donald Trump has promised to grant Ukraine the license that it needs to produce U.S. Patriot missiles in what would be a major boost in its fight against Russia. The Patriot system is one of a handful of systems in existence that can shoot down ballistic missiles. Chrystia Freeland is an economic advisor to the president of Ukraine, and I caught up with her at the Chatham House London conference and asked her for her verdict on this week's NATO conference.
I do think it went well for President Zelensky, and I think it went well for President Zelensky because President Zelensky and the Ukrainian military and the people of Ukraine are doing a terrific job. You know, I'm a Canadian. I'm the former foreign minister, former finance minister, and today unpaid advisor to President Zelensky. And I think from the perspective of the West, of Europe, of North America, we're really lucky that the Ukrainians turn out to be really good at fighting. People thought, you know, I was deputy prime minister when the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, and all of the smartest NATO generals, all of the smartest Five Eye generals thought that Kiev would fall in 3 weeks. This is the 5th year. They are still standing. They are holding Russia to a standstill. They are cutting off Crimea, and they are hitting deep inside Russia to weaken the Russian war machine. It's remarkable, and it's making all of us safer.
What are the key things when it comes to Ukraine that came out of the NATO summit? Is that Donald Trump said the USA would license Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, something that President Zelensky had been asking for a long time. How do you think this will impact Ukraine in the war?
For sure, it's a big deal and it's helpful. The challenge is Ukraine needs Patriots right now. Ukraine is being hammered. And what is so shameful about how Putin is waging this war is these are direct attacks on Ukrainian civilians. These are not military targets. I spoke this morning to someone in the Ukrainian government, and she said she and her family have been sleeping in their car in their underground parking garage all week. This is in Kiev because the attacks are so extreme. So Ukraine needs those Patriots right now.
But so does that mean that the USA licensing the Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine is just too little too late? Because obviously this also comes off the back of the conflict that we're seeing with Iran. And Donald Trump himself said about the missiles, he said, we don't have that many. Has that been having an impact? And is the licensing just not enough?
Look, I think that you could write a whole book about Western support for Ukraine, and you could call it too little too late. If we had provided Ukraine more support earlier on, I think Ukraine would already have won. It would have saved a lot of lives, and actually it would have cost all of us a lot less money. I think that's true today. But I would also say the best is the enemy of the good, and this is a positive step. What we're seeing right now is Europe recognizing that it has to step up its military capacity. And again, I think here Ukraine itself can play a really important role. Denmark and other countries like Sweden have been really, really smart in recognizing that the future of war is being invented in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are really good at designing and building drones, now increasingly missiles. They do it in an innovative way, in an inexpensive way. And I think partnering with Ukraine on the production of weapons is going to be one of the keys to Europe making itself safe.
I mean, you mentioned that European countries should be proud of themselves because of what they are doing. Again, Donald Trump often doesn't use language that would imply he feels the same. And even at the NATO summit, he called President Zelensky President Putin. We all know what happened at the White House last year. Do you think that European countries, European leaders should become inured to the way that the president speaks, the kinds of things he says, or do you think he is to be taken literally?
Oh, I think actually that he needs to be called out much more than we are. I think the fact that the president has again reiterated claims on Denmark is utterly unacceptable. I thought that the Danish Prime Minister was very appropriately very strong and very clear in her pushback. And I think that all of us should be really, really clear. It is not okay to make territorial claims, full stop, particularly on your allies. I thought the comments with regard to Spain were also utterly unacceptable. And I think that European leaders, Western leaders, should have learned by now that trying to appease President Trump just encourages him. What he understands is strength.
We are seeing in the past few days an escalation, once again, of the war between the US and Iran. Does that worry you? Should it worry Ukraine because it puts more pressure on funding and military support?
Yeah, I think it should worry the whole world. I think what we've seen is this poorly planned, ill-conceived war waged without allies isn't working. I think that what it is doing actually is revealing American weakness in a way that is harmful to the United States and harmful to all of the allies.
We've seen more and more Ukrainian drone attacks on specific targets in Russia. For years now, we've been talking about potentially weakening the Russian economy. But do you get the sense or any indication that Putin might be capitulating, or is he not touched by this? And if so, how do you see the war ending?
You know, it's very, very hard to judge what Putin is thinking. He operates in a really, really closed bubble. It's sort of back to the days of Kremlinology. Having said that, what has changed over the past 6 months as the Ukrainians have started striking inside Russia is people in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, affluent or middle-class Russians, for the first time, are starting to recognize that they are living in a country at war. You are now seeing lineups to buy gas because the Ukrainian strikes on Russian refineries mean it's hard to buy gasoline. You're seeing internet access being cut off. And that, I think, is really important because for the first 4 years, if you were a regular Russian in Moscow or St. Petersburg, you could just live a life as if there wasn't a war. That's changed.
Chrystia Freeland, thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It's been another scorching day across the UK as the third heat wave of the summer continues. Across the continent, it's a similar picture, with Western Europe recording its hottest June on record. So what's causing the extreme temperatures, and is this the new normal? Our science editor Tom Clark travelled to Greenland to find out.
Ice-cold water flowing off this stunning glacier in Greenland might seem like the perfect antidote to the heat waves across the UK and Europe. But there's now good evidence the two things are connected.
This glacier is just one of thousands around the edge of Greenland's ice sheet. It's 7 times the size of the UK, and as our climate warms, it's melting increasingly quickly, dumping between 100 and 400 billion tonnes of water each year into rivers and out into the ocean.
A flow so large you can see the area of Greenland's meltwater from space. Where this cold blob meets warmer ocean water making its way up from the tropics, it creates a sharp temperature front in the ocean. Research now shows this cold-warm contrast has a powerful influence on the atmosphere above it. including the jet stream that steers weather systems over Europe, like drawing Saharan heat northwards, causing heat waves. The phenomenon has now been linked to a devastating heatwave-induced storm in 2022 that brought strong winds, giant hailstones and flooding to Central and Southern Europe, and the Spanish 2024 floods where a year's worth of rain fell in a day in parts of the country. But when that ocean temperature front shifts further north, it causes a loop in the jet stream over the UK. Also called an omega block, it draws hot Saharan air even further north, precisely the conditions we saw in June that brought record-breaking temperatures and intense thunderstorms to parts of the UK and Northern Europe, leading to thousands of heat-related deaths, and the same conditions behind the latest heatwave.
With future Greenland melting, we expect more intense and more frequent heat waves, especially in Southern Europe, but occasionally also in Northwest Europe, like now. So probably in the future, we will think that the heat waves we're experiencing now, we won't regard them as extreme anymore because they are going to be even more extreme.
Scientists like Altmans think it should be possible to predict when, and to a certain degree where, European heat waves might occur. But their models need better data on Greenland's melting. A problem researchers have come here this summer to try to solve.
One of the ways is measuring the temperature and say, right, that temperature change measures this much melt, therefore that much melt must be going into the ocean. What we don't actually know is, as temperatures increase, does that same cubic metre of ice melt and end up in the ocean straight away, or is it going to take a little while to get there?
We're about to accompany them up onto Greenland's vast ice sheet to follow their work, attempting to get a better idea of how Greenland's melting and what it means for all of us. Tom Clark, Sky News, in Kangerlussuaq, Greenland.
You're watching The World with me, Barbara Serra. Coming up next, the Norwegian rowing that's taken the World Cup by storm, but one fan is not happy about it. We're going to hear from him after the break.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Less than 48 hours to go till England's crunch World Cup match against Norway, and the team have suffered a big setback. Defender Jarell Quansah has been banned for 2 matches after his red card against Mexico, adding to the team's defensive woes. He will now miss the Norway match and the semi-final should England go through. Well, our sports correspondent Rob Harris joins me now from Miami. Rob, how bad is this?
Well, it's depleting England's defensive options even further. The fact there have been question marks over Reece James's fitness. And then in the game against Mexico on Sunday, Jarell Quansah was sent off. They still did go on to win 3-2, playing much of the second half with 10 men. So it showed that resilience from England. But this is a significant loss in terms of the options available to Thomas Tuchel. And it is raising deeper questions about the process, given the fact following Balogun, the American striker, was also sent off for serious foul play, but he had his ban completely frozen for this tournament for another year, whereas now Quansah has to serve a 2-match ban because what FIFA's disciplinary committee said that he didn't just have to serve the automatic 1-game ban for the straight red card, but they've added an additional game suspension on top of that. So it means he won't just miss this Saturday's quarter-final against Norway, but also a potential semi-final. So he wouldn't be available until a potential final of the World Cup. And we've been getting some reaction from one of his England teammates, Bukayo Saka.
I just found out that obviously it's a 2-match ban, which is incredibly frustrating for us and for him the most, I'd say. But yeah, it's where it is. We're not here to complain. We just need to adapt and pick a team that's ready to beat Norway.
Rob Harris with the latest on that in Miami. Rob, thank you. Oh, no, Rob, I think you still had something to say. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, there are obviously, from Saka, he's not quite getting his anger out there in public, but so many, particularly within the FA, are concerned about the inconsistencies at this World Cup, the fact Donald Trump's intervention helped Balogun escape his ban, even though FIFA insist it was an independent process. It seems maybe you need a head of state to get involved because certainly the FA had no means of appeal. It was relying on the committee. But they're just preparing for their quarter-final now. We do have a first quarter-final underway at the moment. France are playing Morocco in a repeat of the 2022 semi-final. France won that game in Qatar, but it's not going France's way so far because Kylian Mbappe has missed a penalty. Some very strong saves there from the Morocco goalkeeper as we just approach the end of the first half in that game.
Rob Harris with the latest there from Miami on the future game on Saturday and the quarterfinal now between France and Morocco. Rob, thank you. Well, England's next opponents made it through to the quarterfinals for the first time ever after beating Brazil. But it's Norway's fans who've been grabbing the headlines with their Viking-inspired rowing chant. Have a look. The Viking row, people have loved it around the world, but one supporter was not happy. This is Emil Anders Lappen, in the middle of a crowd of rowing fans, but he went viral for refusing to join in. A little earlier, I asked him why.
First of all, I just find it really stupid. That's the thing I thought when they came up with it, that it was stupid and annoying, and I didn't want to do it. And then it copies a lot of what Iceland were doing, and it's factually wrong. They didn't row, they sailed over the Atlantic.
Oh, okay, let's take it step by step. First of all, you said that it's a little bit like what they do in Iceland, what the Icelandic fans do, and that is called the thunderclap. And I think we actually have some images now of the Icelandic thunderclap, which is one of the reasons you didn't want to do it, so let's just watch it now. Okay, so that's the thunderclap in Reykjavik, I think back in 2016. Let's go back to Emil. Emil, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I mean, I see people clapping. I get that there's the drumming bit at the start, but people clapping is very different to people rowing.
But changing a motion isn't enough to get it away from just being a copy of exactly what they did. All they wanted was the same reaction from people.
Accurate. What is it about it that isn't accurate?
The Vikings sailed across the Atlantic. They didn't row across the Atlantic.
Maybe, I don't know about across the Atlantic.
In a song that they released together with rowing, they said they were going to row across the Atlantic, and that's why I've been so annoyed about it.
Right.
The Vikings rowed up rivers and things like that, but across the Atlantic they sailed.
Okay. All right, so Viking ships did have oars, obviously, and people did row on them, but your argument is that they're going to the States, the World Cup is in the States, so it's all about crossing the Atlantic, and obviously you're not going to row across the Atlantic, you're going to need sails. Yes. Is that the point? Yeah. Emil, can I just make the point that perhaps you're missing the wider issue here, that it's about supporting your country, which you obviously do, because look at the shirt that you're wearing, so isn't it all just a bit of fun?
You can say that, but when they released it, I found it stupid, and I wanted to show that I didn't appreciate it, and I think I got the message across.
You certainly did, because the image of you not rowing went viral. But listen, you're wearing the shirt now. Apparently, there is quite a big game on Saturday, so I'm told. So how will you be, or not? No,
I will be supporting them comfortably from my chair at home.
No rowing whatsoever?
Not rowing anywhere.
Okay. What if they were to win, say, and get further on, semi-final, final, you still wouldn't join in the fun?
They can win whatever they want. I will not row.
Okay, that's you sound very certain on that. Emil, well, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much for explaining it to us. I have to say, the rest of the world is loving the Viking row. But hey, listen, to each their own. Right. Anyway, before we go, let me just recap the breaking news that we had at the start of the program, is that we are seeing now the third consecutive night of U.S. attacks on Iran. Various places have been targeted. It has to be said that Iran has retaliated and attacked at least 3 times, we think, in Bahrain, Kuwait. We understand there have been attacks towards Qatar as well. So those attacks continue. We have heard very strong words from the U.S. president at the NATO summit, calling the Iranian leadership scum and calling into question whether the ceasefire was still in place. Now, there's also meant to be, possibly this weekend, scheduled talks between the two sides, although whether that will actually happen remains one of the questions asked. And the Strait of Hormuz, of course, at the center of this. There had been ships going through, twice as many in June that there had been in May, around the 570 in June. Of course, just a sixth of the kind of traffic that we saw this time last year. So more attacks between Iran and the US this evening. We will, of course, bring you the latest on that developing story and all of the day's news on The Wrap with Gillian Joseph coming up next. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations. This is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Tonight on The Wrap, on the cusp of power, Andy Burnham secures the support of all but one of the Labour MPs he needs to confirm his coronation as the party's leader and the country's next Prime Minister. Threats to Donald Trump on the streets of Iran as fears grow of a return to all-out war with the United States. As the UK sets a new hot weather record and the NHS warns of a summer onslaught due to the heat, we investigate if Greenland's melting ice is to blame. Plus, the Prime Minister leads the tribute to total eclipse of the heart star Bonnie Tyler, who's died at the age of 75. We discuss the day's biggest stories with The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Willis. Plus, the first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers from 5:30. Good evening, Zoe and Mark. Welcome to both of you. We'll hear from you in a moment. But first, Andy Burnham is now all but certain to be the UK's next Prime Minister, after the vast majority of Labour MPs backed him today to be the party's new leader. 322 of them, including the man himself, to be exact. That's just one MP short of the total to make it a mathematical impossibility that anyone can run against him. Zoe and Mark, it's a shoo-in now, isn't it? We always thought it would be.
Yes, I think it's kind of fascinating that it's just one MP short, isn't it? I find myself wondering quite how deliberate that is, so it doesn't quite look as much of a rush in. I mean, surely the operation there's so dominant, it's only a matter of time now, and now's the time to find out what he intends to do with this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're trying to make it look like it's not a coronation, but it's obviously a coronation. And what I think is strange is that it kind of historically there would always be a rump of MPs who would almost be prepared to nominate a kind of candidate to the left of the soar away candidate. But clearly the left has muster behind Andy Burnham.
So it looks like it will be a coronation. Well, Mr Burnham had this to say as he went to register his nomination.
Strange thing to say, but I've just been in to nominate myself to be leader of the Labour Party. The nomination process has opened this morning, so glad to see some MPs going in. I'm still the only candidate in the race. It's all starting to feel very real.
And tonight he had this to say about securing the support of 321 other Labour MPs. Their support comes from across the parliamentary Labour Party and reflects a shared belief that Britain needs a new approach to politics. That is the circuit breaker I am offering. Power out of Westminster, an economy rewired for ordinary people, and good growth in every postcode. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has joined us now. And, John, it is just a formality now, isn't it, really?
There's actually been a suggestion this evening that he's actually got to 323 because Judith Cummins, one of the deputy speakers, is said to have nominated him as well. I'm not entirely sure about that. It's not confirmed, but yes, he's there, isn't he? I mean, it reminds me of 2007 when a similar sort of thing happened when Gordon Brown succeeded Tony Blair. I mean, I think the Brown operation was a bit more menacing, actually, than the Andy Burnham one. And there were probably much more dire threats issued back then to people who didn't nominate him. One or two conspicuous names missing from this list that was published by Labour at 7 o'clock. No Keir Starmer. Now, I don't know whether he has said what party leaders sometimes say. They're not going to take any part in the election for their successor. No Shabana Mahmood. No Steve Reed, although we're told he was at a friend or family funeral. And don't forget, as Andy Burnham points out, they've still got Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Nominations don't close till Wednesday. But there was a real clamour to get in there early today for all those who wanted to be showing that they're loyal and obviously desperate for a job. The first MP there was Barry Gardner, great survivor. Served every leader from Blair to Corbyn. And then there was some of the old lefties, Ian Lavery and Andy MacDonald were in there. Wes Streeting was in pretty quickly and tweeted about it. He claimed to be number 81, which was that's
the minimum.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But he took that post down, actually. I'm told there was a real rush at lunchtime, apparently, because there were 3 common statements. And a lot of ministers voted by proxy. They had this complicated system where you could, if you filled in a form and sent an email and all that sort of stuff, you could vote by proxy. Now, I think a lot of the senior ministers did that, but there were quite a lot of junior ministers went in. They stopped at 5 o'clock. At the time, just before then, I was told it was about 200, but as it turned out, far more than that. So I think there was probably more proxies than we thought. So let's see what happens on Monday. The other thing I thought was interesting today, next stage, of course, he's got to get some trade union backing. And there was a very grudging backing from Sharon Graham of Unite. Unite put out a statement saying they were giving conditional nomination for Andy Burnham. Now, this is the union, of course, that has threatened once or twice it's cut its money for Labour and it's threatened to disaffiliate. But Sharon Graham said today, she said, this moment feels like the last chance saloon. If warm words are not followed up by action, workers and communities prepared to listen now will walk away. And then she concluded, Labour will get one shot. They now need to take it. I mean, she is actually facing a re-election battle with an opponent at the moment. But Sharon Graham, always very outspoken and been very critical of Keir Starmer, and she's not exactly given a ringing endorsement to Andy Burnham either.
Yes, on condition. Zoe, there's quite a hefty intro, isn't there, for Andy Burnham? Things that he has to tackle almost straight away, and people describing it as the sort of golden 3 months where he has to hit head-on big issues like defence, say.
And it's interesting why he went in on with his Instagram feed straight away. He made that video about Labour's stance on Israel and Gaza, which is like a very clear statement of intent. Basically, I realised how many people fell out of love with Labour over Keir Starmer's original handling of that. And that, I mean, there are, scores of thousands of Labour members who will say that's true, but that's very much not the story you got from the kind of media noise around Starmer. That was all, kind of, he hasn't delivered on this, he U-turns all the time. Certainly Labour faithful care much more about the Israel and Gaza and the foreign policy stance more generally, cozying up to Trump, than they care about whether he changes a decision.
Mark, what about the big names missing today? As John was saying, Shabana Mahmood, nowhere to be seen. We've got till Wednesday, but does that signify perhaps who's in and who's out of his cabinet?
Maybe, and of course he's left us all guessing because he won't confirm any of these roles yet. That leaves an awful lot of questions, not just about the personnel in his cabinet, but what his policy stance is going to be. The big question is that, as you say, a sign that these people are just definitely out, or is it a sign that negotiations are still ongoing? We can see that Andy Burnham has navigated negotiations over the last few weeks and months really, really effectively in terms of knocking out those rivals. The fact that he doesn't have a challenger and is very shortly going to be passing that threshold at which it's mathematically impossible for there to be a challenger, is because he's managed to do those deals with Angela Rayner, with Wes Streeting, with others. One interesting name I noticed today was his piece in The Times about helping Britain defend itself, getting back, standing up on our own 2 feet for security, retweeted very promptly by John Healey, the man whose resignation as Defence Secretary prompted eventually Keir Starmer's downfall. And that's a really important endorsement, given the Defence Investment Plan is Keir Starmer's, and it's not a good one.
And John Healey's one of the ones who's nominated him. The change in stance on Israel and Gaza, I mean, that will be seen by many as a sop to the left, because he's done an interview with The Guardian and also put out a video, which he says, I know many people feel at the start of Israel's military action in Gaza, my party didn't get it right. I'm sorry about that. We need to do better. Now, the two of the low points of Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party, it actually came before he was Prime Minister. You'll recall that he gave an interview to the broadcaster Nick Ferrari when he was asked. Nick Ferrari said, is cutting off power, cutting off water in Gaza an appropriate response to the atrocity of the Israeli invasion and so on? He said, I think that Israel does have that right. It's an ongoing situation. Obviously, everything should be done within international law. There was a massive backlash to that. And a week or so later, he had a big rebellion in the House of Commons on an SNP motion calling for a ceasefire. About half a dozen MPs, frontbenchers, quit. Some were sacked. Total rebellion, 56. So And you remember, of course, he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to recognising Palestine a year or so ago. So it's a big change on foreign policy.
But there is also, it was interesting because when Andy Burnham first floated in that interview with the Times that he was going to change his stance, change Labour's stance on Israel and Gaza, all the people who really lost faith with the party over that issue were saying, well, that won't be enough. He's got to go for more sanctions. He's got to go for, you know, like ban the settler trade, like the trade coming from illegal settlers. There was lots of demands that they said that it wouldn't be enough if you didn't go with them as well. And then by the early evening, when he did release that video on Instagram, he was talking about further sanctions and he was talking about war crimes. Yeah. So it's quite a big deal.
And we talk about the Labour left, but of course this is also about people who were in the left of Labour who are now in the Green Party. The Green Party under Zach Polanski has grown massively. I heard a Green strategist recently describe themselves as describe their party now as the most popular among British Muslim voters, for example. The fragmentation that the Labour Party suffered, not dissimilar to that the Tory Party suffered on the right, is a major challenge. And he only really gets one shot at this because there's a lot of disillusionment, a lot of frustration, and you only get one go.
OK, well, all the
Sharon Graham said.
All the signs pointing
You're agreeing
tonight
with Sharon Graham.
Could
it happens.
Prime Minister by the 20th of July. Next tonight, fears that tit-for-tat missile exchanges between Iran and the United States could lead to a resumption of a regional war in the Middle East. Iran today launched missiles at US bases across the region, including in Jordan. The United States attacked dozens of sites in Iran, with an Iranian official claiming that one airstrike targeted the area around a nuclear power plant. Our Middle East